I always thought our family looked like the kind of people who belong in a Thanksgiving commercial, one of those Target or Home Goods ads with smiling faces, neutral sweaters, and perfect lighting. Mark was our golden boy. 18, tall, lean, with a jawline that could probably slice through a loaf of bread. He was the kind of kid teachers adored and teenage girls wrote about in their journals. But more than that, he was kind. He held doors open. He called his grandmother every Sunday. He worked hard and never made us worry. I used to joke that he was the result of all the good parenting books I read in my 30s, the ones with soft covers and titles like Raising the Whole Child or The Conscious Parent. Of course, it wasn't true. Mark turned out great mostly because he just is great. My husband, Hub short for Hubert, but no one calls him that anymore, was the type of man who always looked put together, even in sweatpants. He was charming in that suburban dad way, lawn perfectly mowed, barbecue mastered, and an opinion about everything. He loved order, respect, and being right, not necessarily in that order. We'd been married for 19 years. 19. Sometimes it felt like we'd lived 3 different marriages within that one timeline. The newlywed years filled with passion and ambition. The middle years, mostly about work, bills, and raising Mark. And then the quiet years, the ones where we started watching separate shows on Netflix. Still, we were fine. At least, that's what I told myself. It was early spring when Mark came home from college for a weekend visit. He'd been modeling part-time for 3 years, a side job that started almost by accident. Some local scout spotted him at a coffee shop, asked if he'd ever considered representation, and 2 weeks later, he was posing in jeans for a mid-tier clothing brand's catalog. Nothing scandalous, nothing wild, just a paycheck and some good photos for his portfolio. But this time was different. He came through the front door with a bright grin and a flat, oversized envelope tucked under his arm. "Mom," he called, his voice echoing through the hallway. "You have to see this." I was in the kitchen, trying to make Hub's favorite roast chicken, the one I never quite get right because I always forget to dry the skin. Mark slid the envelope onto the counter, eyes shining with excitement. He opened it, and there it was, a proof print from his upcoming perfume campaign. The photo was, well, let's just say it wasn't the kind of thing you frame on the mantle. Mark stood shirtless, wearing nothing but low-rise black trousers, his head tilted slightly, gaze smoldering. Another model, a woman, leaned against him, her face hidden in his shoulder. The lighting was sensual, all warm shadows and soft focus, the kind of thing that could sell lust in a bottle. "Wow," I said, trying not to sound too shocked. "That's artistic." He laughed. "Yeah, the campaign's for a new fragrance line. They said they wanted something raw and modern. I think it's going to run in a couple of magazines this summer." I smiled at him, proud but cautious. "You look amazing, sweetheart. And congratulations. This looks professional." Big step up. Then came the voice I didn't want to hear yet. "Hub," from the living room. "What's that?" Mark turned, holding up the print like a trophy. "My new campaign. For Luster, it's a fragrance brand." Hub walked in, drying his hands with a dish towel. His smile faded the moment his eyes landed on the photo. He froze. It was the kind of stillness that told me immediately this was not going to end well. He blinked once, then again, his jaw tightening. "Is that you?" Mark nodded, still grinning. "Yeah, cool, right?" Hub's voice dropped. "You're half naked, Mark." Mark shrugged. "It's modeling, Dad. It's not like I'm doing anything inappropriate. It's a fragrance ad." Hub exhaled through his nose, that sharp, disappointed sound men make when they think words aren't enough. "I didn't send you to college so you could take your clothes off for a paycheck." That stung. I saw Mark's smile falter. "Dad," he said quietly, "it's not like that. This is a legit brand. They're paying good money. It's professional." Hub turned to me, looking for backup. "You're okay with this?" I felt my stomach twist. He wanted me to side with him, to be the united parental front. But in that moment, all I saw was our son's face, the pride in his eyes fading, replaced with confusion and embarrassment. I said carefully, "He's an adult, Hub. And honestly, it's a beautiful photo. Tasteful even." "Tasteful?" He scoffed. "He's practically naked, Hub." I sighed. "It's an ad, not an OnlyFans account." That was probably the wrong thing to say. He set the dish towel down, slow and deliberate, the way a police officer holsters a weapon before making an arrest. "Mark," he said, his tone clipped. "You're better than this." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. His cheeks flushed red. Better than what exactly? I asked, stepping in. Than selling himself like that, Hub said. I didn't raise him to what? I interrupted. To have confidence? To use his talent? To earn money doing something he enjoys? Hub glared at me. To have decency, Anna. The room went silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. I could feel the words bubbling up inside me, the ones I'd been holding back for years. The ones that tasted like irony and cheap cologne. But I swallowed them for now. Mark looked between us, his eyes darting like a trapped bird's. I'm gonna go put this away, he muttered. Grabbing the photo and heading upstairs, Hub shook his head and muttered something under his breath. Something about morals and embarrassment. I just stood there, hands gripping the counter, wondering how a family that looked so perfect could crack open so fast. That evening, as I set the table for dinner, the tension still hung in the air like humidity. Mark stayed mostly quiet, poking at his food. Hub talked about work, his usual safe topic, but even then, his sentences were shorter, his voice flatter. We were mid-silence when the doorbell rang. Oh, I said, glancing at the clock. That must be the Dawsons. Our friends Greg and Caroline Dawson were stopping by. They were one of those couples who somehow managed to stay married and still flirt with each other. The kind of people who post pictures of their date nights and somehow don't make you roll your eyes. Hub stood, forcing a smile. I'll get it. As he opened the door, Caroline's voice filled the entryway. Hi. Oh, my God, this place looks beautiful as always. She swept in like a breeze of perfume and confidence. Greg followed, carrying a bottle of wine. Within minutes, the house transformed from cold tension to forced cheerfulness. Everyone was talking except Mark, who lingered in the background, his shoulders tense. When Caroline spotted him, she grinned. Mark, you look so grown up. Last time I saw you, you were what, 16? Yeah, Mark said politely, smiling just enough. Then came the line that changed the tone of the entire night. Wait a second, she said, squinting. Oh my God, Greg. Isn't that the guy from that ad? The perfume one, the one with the moody lighting? Greg snapped his fingers. Yes, that's him. Wow, man. Congrats. That ad's everywhere. You look incredible. I watched Hub's expression harden again like a storm cloud reforming right over the dinner table, and that was the moment I realized the real story of that night wasn't about a photo. It was about shame, the kind that lingers long after the flash goes off. Caroline's words hung in the air like a firework that never quite exploded, bright, loud, and impossible to ignore. Mark froze mid-smile, the fork in his hand hovering somewhere between plate and mouth. Hub's eyes locked on Caroline, then on Mark, then back to his wine glass. He didn't say a word, but his silence was louder than any outburst. I tried to save it, to pull the conversation away from the cliff. Oh, that ad. Yes. Isn't it amazing? We're so proud of him. My tone came out too quick, too light, like a hostess papering over a crack in the wall. Caroline beamed. It's stunning. Honestly, you should frame it. My yoga class was talking about that campaign last week. Everyone was wondering who the new model was. You've got star power, Mark. Hub's fork clinked against his plate. Star power, he repeated softly, with a half smile that wasn't a smile at all. Mark gave a small laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Thanks, Miss Dawson. It's been cool, I guess. I caught his eyes for a second, the kind of silent plea that says, let's just survive this meal. Dinner went on. Roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, polite laughter that felt rehearsed. Greg was talking about his new project, something about expanding his construction business into Florida, when Hub suddenly interrupted. So, Mark, he said, what's next? More creative work? Mark hesitated. Maybe. My agency's talking about a potential shoot in La, Hub said, drawing out the syllables. Land of dreams and half-clothed ambition. Caroline chuckled awkwardly. Hub, don't tease him, he's doing great. But Hub wasn't joking. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the table rhythmically, a tell I knew too well. Tell me, son, he said. Do they teach you anything at that fancy college of yours, or just how to smolder for the camera? Hub, I said sharply. No, I'm curious, he continued. Because when I was his age, I worked 2 jobs, real ones, not standing around pretending to sell bottled pheromones. The table went still. Even the wine seemed to stop swirling in its glass. Mark's face flushed crimson. Dad, Hubert, I cut in, my voice low but firm. Enough. He laughed, that short, humorless laugh men used to hide their discomfort. What? I'm just talking. We can't even have an honest conversation in this house anymore? Greg cleared his throat. Maybe we should. No, Hub said again, holding up a hand. Let's talk. Let's talk about what passes for art these days. Mark pushed his chair back, the legs scraping across the tile. I'm not doing this. Sit down, Hub ordered. Dad, I said sit down. And there it was, the voice that used to terrify a 6-year-old with dirty shoes and broken toys. Mark stayed standing. His chest rose and fell fast. You know what's funny? He said quietly. You talk about work and dignity, but you never tell anyone how you used to. Mark, I warned, but it was too late. How you used to pose half naked for Abercrombie back in the day. Mark finished, his voice shaking. Yeah, Mom told me. Found one of the old catalogs in Grandma's attic. You were, what, 22? Same age as me? Caroline gasped softly. Greg tried to look anywhere but at Hub. Hub's face went pale, then red, then blank. That's different, he said. Different how? Mark shot back. Because it was the 90s? Because you were the one doing it? Hub stood now, the chair tipping slightly behind him. Don't you dare compare that. I'm not comparing, Mark said, voice cracking. I'm saying maybe stop acting like I'm some kind of disappointment just because you forgot what it felt like to be proud of yourself. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It pulsed. It hurt. Caroline whispered something to Greg. They exchanged a look, that silent adult telepathy that says we should go. I forced a laugh, desperate. Dessert, anyone? I made lemon pie. No one moved. Finally, Greg stood. I think we should head out. Big morning tomorrow. Caroline nodded, eyes soft with pity. Mark, you're doing great, sweetheart. Don't let anyone dim that light. When the door closed behind them, the house felt cavernous. Every sound echoed. Mark was already heading upstairs. I'm going back to campus early tomorrow, he muttered. Mark, but he didn't turn around. His door shut with a final, heavy click. Hub stayed standing for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. Then he sank back into his chair and said, almost to himself, he shouldn't have said that. No, I replied quietly. But you shouldn't have either. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. His eyes were tired, almost afraid. You told him? I swallowed. He found it himself. He rubbed his temples, exhaling. That was a lifetime ago, Anna. Apparently not long enough for you to forget how it felt. He didn't answer. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the living room wall, throwing our shadows in long, distorted shapes. Him sitting, me standing, to outlines that used to overlap, now reaching in different directions. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to the house, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of wood settling. Somewhere upstairs, Mark was pacing. I could hear his footsteps, restless and uneven. Hub turned beside me, his back facing mine. His breathing was shallow, not quite asleep. I wanted to touch him, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. To remind him that shame can shape a man more cruelly than failure ever could. But the space between us felt too wide, too cold. I thought about the photograph, about how a single image could fracture something years of love had built. And how, deep down, maybe it wasn't even about the picture at all. Maybe it was about everything we'd stopped saying. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee, strong, bitter, slightly burnt. Hub was already in the kitchen, tie perfectly knotted, scrolling through his phone. Mark's bag sat by the door. Leaving already? I asked. He nodded without looking up. Got an early class. I tried to hug him. He let me, but it felt half-hearted, like hugging a ghost of my own child. When the door closed, the house went silent again. Hub finally looked up from his phone. You think I was wrong? I think you were scared, I said simply. Scared of seeing yourself in him. He didn't respond, just stared at the coffee, watching the steam fade into nothing. And in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by the smell of roast chicken and burnt pride, I realized something that would stay with me for the rest of the story. Shame doesn't disappear when you bury it, it just waits for the next generation to dig it up. The morning after Mark left, the house felt hollow. Not quiet hollow. There's a difference. Quiet can be peaceful. Hollow feels like a place where something used to live. His room still smelled faintly of cologne, that expensive kind he got from the shoot. The bed was unmade, a jacket tossed over the chair, a coffee cup on the desk half filled with melted ice. I stood at the doorway for a long time, my fingers grazing the frame. I'd always loved that about being a mother, the way your child leaves little echoes of themselves everywhere they go. But this time, it didn't feel sweet. It felt like grief. Downstairs, Hub was already gone. His car keys were missing, the smell of aftershave lingering. No note, no text, just gone. It was easier for him that way to let silence do his talking. I poured myself coffee, sat at the counter, and scrolled through my phone. That's when I saw Mark's campaign ad officially released. There he was, my son. The photo was in black and white, bold, sleek, unapologetic. Mark's jawline sharp under the studio light, a woman's hand tracing his shoulder, his expression confident, sensual but restrained. It wasn't obscene. It was art, raw and youthful and honest. The caption read, "Feral, a fragrance for those who dare to be seen." The comments were already rolling in. Damn, who's the new guy? He's like a mix of Timothy and young DiCaprio. This ad is. Thousands of likes. I should have been thrilled. But then I saw the one comment that burned through the rest. "Imagine your mom seeing this." A chill spread through me, because I had seen it. And more importantly, his father had too. By afternoon, the ad was everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Clips of Mark's behind-the-scenes shoot, his laughter, his focus, the photographer calling him unnatural. The video had over 2 million views by dinner. And somewhere between pride and fear, I realized the thing I'd been ignoring for years. Our son was growing into someone neither of us had the language to understand. Hub came home late that evening. He didn't say hello, didn't even take off his jacket. He just walked straight to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and leaned against the counter. "You've seen it," he said flatly. "Yes." He nodded once, eyes fixed on the floor. "Everyone's seen it. It's beautiful," I said quietly. He gave a short laugh, humorless, bitter. "Beautiful, sure, that's one word for it. It's his work, Hub. It's him, half naked, in a magazine." I sighed. "So were you." His head snapped up. Don't what? Tell the truth?" He slammed the beer down, foam spilling over his hand. "It's not the same." I stared at him, not angry, just tired. "You keep saying that, but you never say why." He looked away. His voice dropped. "Because I didn't have a choice." I blinked. "What?" He rubbed his forehead, exhaling hard. "You think I liked doing that job? Standing there, half naked, pretending to be someone else? I needed the money, rent, college. My dad had just left. I did what I had to do." For the first time, his voice didn't sound cruel. It sounded young, raw. "I remember," I said softly, "but you also used to tell that story like it was funny, like it was freedom." He let out a small laugh this time, sad. Maybe that's how I survived it. Later that night, when he'd gone to bed, I sat alone on the couch and pulled out an old photo album. Not the digital kind, the real one, with film photos tucked behind crinkled plastic. There it was. Hub, 19, tanned and lean, standing in front of an Abercrombie store, jeans slung low, grin wide and reckless. His hair longer then, his arms smooth and strong. I remembered seeing him for the first time like that, this beautiful, sunlit boy who didn't seem to know he was breaking hearts just by breathing. And now, 2 decades later, he couldn't look at his own son without flinching. The next day, Mark called. "Hey Mom," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Can we talk?" "Of course, honey. How's campus?" He hesitated. "Weird. People keep recognizing me. I mean, it's kinda cool, but also, it's a lot. I can imagine." "Dad hasn't called," he said after a pause. "No," I admitted. "He's processing." Mark laughed, that low, humorless laugh I recognized too well. "Yeah, processing how to be ashamed of me, probably." "Don't say that," I said. "But it's true, isn't it? He hates what I do." "He doesn't hate you. He hates himself, and you just remind him of the part he's been running from." There was silence. Then softly, "You really think that?" "I know it." He exhaled. "Maybe I shouldn't have said what I said the other night. Maybe," I said gently. But maybe he needed to hear it. That evening, I found Hub sitting in the backyard, beer in hand again, staring at nothing. "You know he called," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good. He's hurting. So am I." I took a breath. "Then maybe it's time you both stopped pretending it's about the photo." He didn't look at me. "You think I don't know that? Then what are you afraid of, Hub?" He took a long drink before answering. "That he's better than me. That he'll get everything I wanted and forget who helped him get there. That one day, he'll look back and see me the way I saw my father, weak, angry, small." His voice cracked on the last word. It was the first time in years I'd seen him cry. Not the loud, messy kind. Just a quiet tear that slid down his cheek like it had been waiting decades to fall. I wanted to reach for him, but I didn't. Sometimes love isn't about fixing, it's about witnessing. So I sat beside him, silent, watching the shadows stretch across the lawn. 3 days later, Mark came home. No warning, no text, just home. He walked in wearing that same leather jacket from the shoot, his hair a little longer, his eyes softer somehow. Hub was in the kitchen. The air thickened immediately. Mark cleared his throat. Hey. Hub looked up. Hey. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, Mark said, "You were right." Hub frowned. About what? About me not understanding what work means. Hub's shoulders tensed. I didn't mean no, Mark said, shaking his head. You did. And maybe you were right. Modeling isn't exactly saving lives. But it's work, Dad. It's showing up. It's hearing no 99 times before you get one yes. It's holding your breath for a camera that sees everything wrong with you before it sees what's right. It's not easy. Hub didn't speak. Mark swallowed. But I get it now. Maybe it's not about pride for you. Maybe it's about survival. You did what you had to do. I'm doing what I love. And maybe that's the real difference. Hub's jaw tightened, then softened. You sound a lot like your mother. I smiled from the doorway. That's usually a compliment. Hub looked at Mark again, eyes glossy. You look good in that ad, son. Mark blinked, unsure if he heard it right. Thanks. It's not easy to see, Hub admitted, but I'm proud of you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't movie perfect, but it was real. Mark smiled, the kind that started in the eyes before it reached the lips. Thanks, Dad. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked through the house again, past the old photos, the magazines, the echoes of arguments and apologies. And I thought about the strange thing time does to people, how it strips away our illusions until all that's left are the mirrors we hand to our children. Some of us spend years avoiding our reflection. Others, like Mark, face it head on, not because it's easy, but because they're brave enough to be seen. And maybe that's what love really is, not protection, but permission. Permission to grow, to fail, to change, to remember. Because the truth is, every photograph fades. But what it captures, the courage to be yourself, lasts forever. The first real sign that life was changing came 2 weeks later, when Mark's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, emails, tags, mentions. The ad had gone viral again. This time through some influencer who called it the rebirth of American masculinity. Suddenly, every brand wanted a piece of him. Some offers were small local denim labels, new fragrance startups. Others were from companies with names that used to make him whisper someday. Someday had arrived faster than any of us were ready for. He came home that weekend, full of stories and excitement, eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child, building his first camera rig out of cardboard. Mom, they want me to go to next month for a campaign shoot, he said, pacing the kitchen. They said it's a test, but if it works, I could get signed. His father, sitting at the table with his newspaper, didn't look up. A test, Hub muttered. You mean they'll use you for free? Mark ignored the jab. No. They're paying for flight and hotel. It's real, Dad. Hub folded the paper. You sure they're not taking advantage of you? Why do you always assume the worst? Mark shot back. Because I've lived long enough to see what the best can cost. The tension that had softened days earlier began to stretch again, invisible but heavy. I could see both of them, one afraid of losing control, the other terrified of being misunderstood. Let him go, I said quietly. He needs this. Hub sighed. He needs a plan, not dreams. Mark laughed sharply. You ever think those might be the same thing? And then he was gone, back to the world of airports, lenses, and light. Law did something to him. The city has a way of peeling people open, not cruelly, just inevitably. It reveals what's beneath the polish. When he called from his hotel room that first night, I could hear it in his voice, the rush, the exhaustion. Mom, it's insane here, he said, breathless. Everyone's so beautiful, like unreal. And you fit right in, I said. He laughed. You have to say that. No, I don't. The shoot lasted 3 days. The director was French, eccentric, obsessed with truth through imperfection. Mark told me later that he made everyone pose with no makeup, no retouching, raw light only. He said beauty is what survives honesty, Mark said. That line stuck with me for weeks. When the campaign dropped, it wasn't glossy or glamorous, it was stripped, human. It made people feel something, and that's rarer than beauty. But success comes with shadows. The internet giveth and the internet taketh away. Alongside the praise came the noise, strangers dissecting his body, his face, his expressions, rumors, DMs, photos leaked from shoots. His smile started to change, still bright, but less free. When he came home again, I noticed he didn't leave his phone out anymore. They don't leave you alone, he muttered one night over dinner. You think you're just making art, and suddenly everyone wants to own you. Hub looked up. That's what you signed up for. Mark frowned. No, I signed up to be seen, not consumed. Their fights got quieter after that, not less painful, just more controlled. Hub tried to help in the only way he knew how, advice disguised as criticism. Be careful with contracts, don't let them make you something you're not. Remember where you came from. Mark, too tired to fight, would nod, then retreat to his room, headphones in. Lost in whatever song made the noise bearable. It appeared in a mid-tier online magazine, the kind that tries to sound intellectual while feeding off gossip. The headline read, "Is Mark Hudson America's next obsession or its next casualty?" It was flattering at first glance, but halfway through, it turned sharp. The writer implied he'd slept his way into opportunities, hinted at tension with his father, called him a product of millennial parenting, all affirmation, no discipline. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. Hub read it too, though he pretended not to care. It's just noise, he said, but I saw how tight his jaw was. Mark, on the other hand, went silent for days. When he finally called, his voice was hollow. They don't even know me, he whispered. They don't have to, I said. That's the game. Then maybe I don't want to play. You already are. He came home again, this time not for rest, but retreat. The house that had felt hollow before now felt full again, to full, maybe. He'd wander from room to room, restless, chain drinking coffee, unable to sleep. It's like I'm living into worlds, he said one night, sitting by the window. Out there, I'm this image. In here, I'm whatever's left. I wanted to tell him it would balance someday, but that would have been a lie. Fame isn't a seesaw, it's quicksand. Hub, meanwhile, had started watching old family videos, the kind stored on dusty DVDs. One night, I found him in the living room, the screen flickering with images of Mark at 5, running through sprinklers, laughing without fear. He used to be so happy, Hub murmured. He still is, I said, just in different ways. No, he said softly. Now he smiles for a camera. Back then, he smiled for us. That broke something in me. Because he wasn't wrong. Weeks later, Mark got invited to a gala, a huge event for the fashion world. Red carpet, flashing lights, press. He wanted us there. I almost said no, but the look in his eyes stopped me. So we went, Hub in his best suit, me in a simple black dress. We looked out of place, not poor, just real. When Mark appeared on the carpet, cameras erupted. He looked like a man who belonged to light. And yet, as he posed, his eyes found us in the crowd, and for a moment, I saw my boy again. Afterward, we met backstage. He hugged me first, tight, then turned to his father. Hey dad, hey kid. Hub cleared his throat. You, clean up nice. Mark smiled. You too. It was awkward but tender. Then a reporter interrupted, asking for a quick interview. Mark looked at us. Wait for me? Always, I said. The interview started simple: career, future plans, inspiration. But then came the question that changed everything. Your father was also a model, right? Do you think you've surpassed him? I saw Mark hesitate. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think we've just walked different paths, he said. The reporter pushed, but your career's already bigger than his ever was. Does that create tension? No, Mark said firmly. My dad taught me everything about resilience. If I'm standing here, it's because of him. When the interview aired the next day, that line went viral. For once, not because of controversy, but because it was true. People called it the redemption moment, but for us, it wasn't about headlines. That night, Hub and Mark sat together on the porch for the first time in years, two men finally seeing each other clearly. But peace is never permanent. 2 weeks later, an old photo resurfaced, Hub's modeling days. A fan account had found it, paired it next to Mark's ad. Like father, like son, the caption read. The comments weren't cruel, but they stung. Some mocked Hub's age, others romanticized their resemblance. He used to be hot, one wrote. Hub laughed when he saw it, but I could see the quiet ache in his eyes. I guess time wins after all, he said. No. I told him. You do. Around that time, Mark started dating someone, a fellow model, beautiful in that effortless way youth sometimes is. Her name was Clara. She was smart, funny, and exactly the kind of woman who could both ground and undo him. They were magnetic together. For months, things looked good. Until one morning, I woke up to headlines screaming, Mark Hudson and Clara Voss split, sources say it got ugly. Mark refused to talk about it. It's not true, he said. But no one cares. And he was right. In a world where truth was currency, lies were more profitable. The media storm grew, and so did the cracks. He started drinking more, sleeping less. The light that once made him glow began to burn. One night, he called me at a Mom, he whispered, voice trembling. I don't know if I can keep doing this. My heart froze. Come home, I said. Right now. And he did. He arrived the next morning unshaven, eyes red, shoulders slumped like a boy who'd been running too long. He collapsed on the couch, and for hours, I just sat with him, silent. When Hub came home that evening, he didn't say anything. He just walked over, placed a hand on Mark's shoulder and said, You don't have to be strong today, that was all. No lectures, no judgment, just a father finally understanding. Over the next few days, the house became a sanctuary again. Mark cooked. We watched old movies. Hub told stories about the past, not warnings this time, just memories. I caught glimpses of something healing between them. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One morning, Mark came into the kitchen holding his phone. They offered me a new campaign, he said quietly. It's about mental health, real stories, real people. Hub raised an eyebrow. And you want to do it? Yeah, Mark said. But this time, I want to be part of the message, not just the image. And that's how it began, a shift, small but real. The shoot wasn't glamorous. No filters, no perfection, just people telling truths they'd hidden behind smiles. Mark talked about pressure, anxiety, the illusion of success. The video went viral again, but differently this time. People didn't just see him, they saw themselves. By the time the campaign wrapped, something had changed. Hub started coming to the shoots not as a critic, but as support. The crew loved him. They called him old school cool. For the first time, father and son were on the same side of the lens. Months passed. Fame settled into something less like fire and more like light. Steady, warm. Mark found balance. Clara even called once, just to apologize. And I watched all of it unfold like a film I'd waited my whole life to see. But deep down, I knew life doesn't end in peace, it evolves through it. And somewhere beyond the quiet, another storm was waiting. Because that's what stories like ours are, not fairy tales, but constellations. Pieces of light, strung together by the dark between them. It started like a whisper, a shadow in the corner of our lives. Mark had grown used to attention. We all had, in different ways, but fame has a strange hunger. It asks more than you are willing to give, and leaves nothing behind except echoes. The first leak came on a quiet Tuesday morning. A single photograph, taken by someone he trusted, someone on set, someone who had a camera with too much access, found its way online. It was innocent enough, Mark in a candid pose, relaxed, mid-laugh, but someone had cropped it, twisted it, turned a smile into something scandalous, something provocative. Within hours, it had gone viral. Social media erupted. Comments weren't just opinions anymore. They were verdicts, judgments. He was a hero. He was a villain. He was reckless. He was immoral. He was brilliant. He was shallow. I watched from the kitchen table as he sat frozen, phone in hand, his face a mask of disbelief and fear. Mom, he whispered, voice barely audible over the chaos on his screen. Why would anyone do this? I reached for his hand. Because people always will. It doesn't reflect who you are, Mark. It reflects who they want you to be. He shook his head. But they're right. About everything. They'll destroy me. I held him tighter. No, not destroy you. They'll try. And you'll rise anyway. That's the difference. Hub didn't say anything that night. He sat on the other side of the room, shoulders tense, jaw tight. I could feel him calculating, trying to measure blame, trying to shield himself from some invisible shame. I caught his eye. He looked away. Hub has never been good at words. When the stakes feel real, it's just a photo, he said eventually. People exaggerate. I wanted to scream that it wasn't just a photo, that it had become a storm. But I didn't. I sipped my tea and let the house absorb the tension, letting Mark retreat to his room, phone clutched to his chest like it contained his life. The next morning, the fallout began. Emails from brands he hadn't even met, demanding explanations. Messages from fans, both adoring and cruel. The internet has a way of blurring the line between love and hate, and Mark found himself caught between two impossible poles. "Mom, I feel like I can't breathe," he said, pacing the living room. "Everywhere I go, someone sees me differently. I can't be myself anywhere." I wanted to tell him it would pass, that he was stronger than this, but I also knew it wouldn't, not entirely. Fame doesn't forgive easily. Hub tried to intervene. He called the photographer who had leaked the photo, demanding explanations, threats veiled as concern. Mark recoiled. "Dad, stop. This isn't your battle. I have to face it." Hub's lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't just stand by. You're making it worse," Mark snapped. The room went quiet. I stayed in the corner, watching them, feeling the old pattern repeat. Father and son, each too proud, too wounded, too afraid to admit fear, too afraid to forgive. Days turned into a week. Mark stopped answering calls from friends. He stayed in his room, headphones in, listening to music that had once made him dance in the kitchen. He began to skip meals, only drinking water and coffee. His laughter, once so easy, became rare, a flicker of light that disappeared before you could call it warmth. I knew we were teetering on the edge. The boy we'd watched grow into a man, the one who carried light into every room, was retreating into shadows. Then came the article. A journalist from a major outlet had dug into his past, twisting his success into a story about privilege and manipulation. Mark Hudson's rise. But at what cost? It read. The piece implied he'd used people, hinted at dark secrets, questioned his integrity. I read it first, then Hub, then Mark, who refused to open the browser for days. "Mom," he whispered finally, "I don't even recognize myself in this." I knelt beside him. "You're still you, but this is their version, not yours. You'll remember that, right?" He nodded, but the shadow in his eyes didn't lift. 2 weeks later, Mark disappeared. He didn't call. He didn't respond to texts. Hub was furious. I was terrified. I called everyone I could think of, friends, agents, even the hotel he'd stayed at last. Nothing. The house felt empty in a way it hadn't before, hollow, silent, except for my own heartbeat, echoing in every room. I tried to hold myself together for Hub, but even he retreated into his own storm of regret and guilt. "We failed him," he said one night, staring at the ceiling, voice low. "We let it happen. We did the best we could," I said. "We just didn't know what storm would hit." It took days before Mark called. His voice was trembling. "Mom, can I come home?" "Of course," I whispered, tears streaming. He arrived 2 days later, carrying nothing but a backpack and exhaustion. He looked smaller than when he had left, like the world had stripped pieces from him, and he'd simply worn them like scars. I embraced him tightly, feeling the boy and the man collapse into my arms. Hub came in quietly, hesitant. Mark barely looked at him. "Dad," he said softly. Hub nodded. "Hey, kid, you're home." That was all. Simple. Raw. Enough. Over the next week, Mark retreated into a small room at the back of the house. He wrote, he drew, he photographed small acts of creation, quiet gestures of survival. "I'm working on something," he told me one night. "A project. About everything. About light and shadows and truth." I didn't ask for details. I knew he needed space to make sense of the chaos. Then one evening, he invited Hub and me to his room. The walls were covered in photographs, some beautiful, some haunting. Each told a story of what fame had taken, what it had revealed, what it had allowed him to become. "I wanted to capture the truth," he said. "Not just me, but us, our family, everything we've been through." We walked slowly, studying each image. One showed Hub at 19, standing at the Abercrombie store, young and proud. Another showed Mark during his first campaign, smiling for the camera. A third juxtaposed the two, father and son, separated by time, united by struggle. I realized then that the project wasn't just art. It was a mirror. Hub's voice broke the silence. "I didn't know," he said. "I never realized how much you were carrying." Mark smiled faintly. "You think I did it alone? You gave me everything, even if you didn't mean to, even if you didn't know how." There was no argument, no tension. Just understanding. Fragile, but real. The exhibition went public a month later. Critics called it raw, unflinching, courageous. People wept at the honesty. But for us, the audience was smaller. It was us mother, father, son seeing each other truly for the first time in years. Mark walked through the gallery with Hub beside him, shoulders brushing occasionally, an unspoken truce forming with each step. I followed, quiet, feeling the warmth of light in a place I hadn't felt in months. By the end of the night, Mark stood in front of the largest photograph himself, sitting on the edge of a rooftop at dawn, the city sprawled behind him. "This is me," he said, "and this is us. Everything broken, everything whole." Hub placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done well," he said, "better than I ever could have imagined." And in that moment, I saw it, the boy who had been crushed by the world and the man who had risen from it, side by side with the father who had feared losing him, learning how to see again. Months passed. Life didn't become perfect. Fame didn't disappear. The internet still had its noise, but it no longer owned Mark. He found balance in work, in friends, in small joys. Hub learned to watch without judgment, to support without interference. And I, ever the witness, understood finally that love is not control. It is permission. Permission to fall, to rise, to exist, to be seen, and to forgive. One evening, as the sun set over the quiet house, Mark, Hub, and I sat on the porch. He held a notebook, scribbling ideas for his next project. Hub sipped his tea in silence. I watched them, seeing past the shadows, past the scars, past the chaos, and I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. Because they had survived. Because the fall had led to the frame, and the frame held the light, and in that light, I knew our story, with all its fractures and brilliance, would endure. Not as a headline, not as a scandal, but as a testament to truth, resilience, and the fragile, beautiful art of being human. The house was quiet that morning, but it felt alive in a way it hadn't in months. I walked through the halls, past photos, past echoes of arguments and apologies, past reminders of mistakes and victories alike. Every room carried a memory, some tender, some sharp, and I realized that each one was a piece of our story, stitched together not perfectly but honestly. I could feel it in my chest, that strange warmth that comes from knowing you've survived storms you thought would break you. Mark was in the kitchen, scribbling notes into his worn notebook, his brow furrowed in focus. Hub was beside him, leaning casually against the counter, reading a magazine, but every now and then, his eyes flicked toward his son, not with judgment, but with pride. They had reached a place I never imagined seeing, father and son, standing on the same side of the world, both wounded, both human, both learning how to be there for each other. I sat at the table and poured myself a cup of tea, letting the morning light spill across the room. The warmth was soft, steady, a comfort I hadn't known I needed. Mark looked up and smiled, a small, genuine curve of lips that reached his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think it's over?" I paused, considering. Over? No, life is never over. But maybe it's settled. For now. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I feel like I've been running forever, chasing something I didn't understand. And now?" I asked. "Now, I just want to be seen for who I am, not what people say I should be." Hub cleared his throat, and for the first time in weeks, his voice was soft. "I've realized something too. It's not about protecting him from the world. It's about being willing to walk with him through it, even when I'm scared." I watched their interaction, this quiet exchange that carried years of fear, pride, and love, and I felt a deep, almost overwhelming sense of relief. That afternoon, we went for a walk through the neighborhood, Mark carrying his camera, Hub walking slowly beside him. The sunlight caught the edges of the houses, the trees, swaying gently, ordinary and steady. And I thought about how life moves in cycles, chaos and calm, failure and triumph, heartbreak and healing. Each moment is a frame in the film of our lives. And sometimes you don't realize the significance until you step back and see the whole picture. Mark paused to take a photo of a bird perched on a lamppost, wings outstretched, fragile and bold at the same time. He smiled at the image on his screen. "It's perfect," he said. "Not perfect in the way you think, Mom, but perfect in its honesty." I nodded, understanding. That honesty, the courage to be seen, to fail, to forgive, was what had guided us through these years of chaos. Later that evening, Hub made dinner. He was quiet, methodical, but there was a softness to his movements I hadn't seen before. Mark helped him, laughing quietly at small mistakes, teasing him gently. And I watched, silently grateful, realizing that family isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about staying present when everything feels fragile. About offering hands and hearts even when the path is uncertain. We sat down to eat together, a simple meal. Pasta, salad, bread, nothing extravagant, nothing glamorous. Yet it felt monumental. Conversation flowed easily. We shared stories, old and new, laughter spilling over the table. And for the first time in months, the weight of judgment, gossip, and fear seemed to lift, replaced by something rare, presence. After dinner, Mark pulled out his notebook again. I want to start a new project, he said. One about resilience. About people who've fallen and still find light. I smiled. Sounds familiar, I said softly. It's our story, isn't it? Hub reached over and placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. And we'll tell it together. That night, I lay in bed, reflecting on the journey we had taken. From the early days of Mark's modeling career, through the viral campaigns, the leaks, the public scrutiny, the depression, and finally the reconciliation, every moment had led to this. And I understood something fundamental. Life doesn't owe you ease. It doesn't promise fairness. But it offers moments of grace if you are willing to see them, to accept them, to fight for them. I realized that love is not about controlling outcomes. It's not about shielding from every storm or orchestrating a flawless path. Love is about showing up. Showing up when it's hard. Showing up when pride and fear tell you to walk away. Showing up when you're unsure, when the world is loud and judgmental. And simply being there with open hands and open hearts. Mark's laughter echoed from the living room, mingling with Hub's quieter chuckle, and I smiled, imagining the frames of our lives like a film reel spinning gently in the projector of memory. The images were imperfect, jagged at the edges, but together they formed a story worth telling. And in that story, I saw the truest measure of human resilience: to fall, to rise, and to continue walking forward together. Through whatever storms may come. As I drifted to sleep, I felt the profound peace of having witnessed transformation. Not perfection, not closure, not a Hollywood ending, but the raw, luminous truth. We survive because we endure, because we care, because we forgive, and because we are willing to face life honestly, even when it terrifies us. In the quiet dark, I whispered a silent blessing. May we always find light within ourselves, and may we always have the courage to see it in each other. Because that is the real story, the one that lasts long after the cameras fade, the headlines vanish, and the world moves on. The story that remains is ours, and in that light, I knew home isn't just a place. It's the people who see you, the hands that hold you steady, the hearts that remain even when the world shakes. That is our frame. That is our redemption.